Chapter 5. Since the school was only 1.5 miles from the Swensons' home, Danny and Peg could walk there and back each day. And Alfred escorted them on the first trip to show them the way. Peg's legs were short, so the walk took longer than Alfred had anticipated, and when they arrived at the schoolyard, it was empty. Danny could hear a murmur of voices reciting something in unison. "Will you go inside with us?" he asked Alfred. Danny's palms were damp, his stomach hurt, and he wished he didn't have to leave Alfred. He wished that no one had ever thought of sending him to school. "It'll be better for you if I don't," Alfred said. "You can show the other boys you can stand on your own 2 feet." As Alfred turned and walked back down the road, Danny gulped, fighting down the fear and the terror that rose in a lump inside his throat. He wouldn't be sick. No, he couldn't be. "Danny, are you scared?" Peg asked. "No," Danny snapped. "Mama told me not to be scared," Peg said. "Mama told me that my very first day of school I'd make a new friend. She told me I'd have lots of friends." "Peg, will you be quiet?" Danny felt close to tears. All the answers he's gotten from Alfred were useless against the awful panic he was feeling. It was better to get this over with as soon as possible, Danny decided. He couldn't stay out here forever. He grabbed Peg's hand and strode toward the building. "Danny, wait!" Peg wailed so loudly that Danny was sure everyone inside the schoolhouse had heard her. Danny didn't pause. "Come on, Peg, we're late already," he snapped. The door opened with a loud creak, and 20 or so students turned to stare. The teacher, a young woman with rosy face, was framed with a coil of dark hair, smiled at Danny and Peg. "Please come in," she said. "Are you new students?" "Yes, ma'am," Danny said. Peg tugged at Danny's arm and struggled to keep his balance. "Danny," she whispered loudly. "I'm Miss Clark," the teacher said. "And what are your names?" "I'm Danny Kelly. This is my little sister Peg," Danny said as Peg jerked on his arm again. Miss Clark's forehead wrinkled as she thought. "I don't know of a Kelly family nearby," she said. "Where do you live?" "Danny, listen to me," Peg insisted loudly. Some of the boys were leaning from their desks to stare at him. A girl about his own age tossed back her curls and snickered. "Be quiet," Danny growled at Peg. He hadn't thought about how he'd explain who they were. He tried to speak up but had to clear his throat and start again. "Our family's not here," he told Miss Clark. "Peg and I are living with, we were adopted by, no, that's not exactly right." He took a deep breath. "We came west from New York City, and Mr. and Mrs. Swenson took us in." "Oh," Miss Clark beamed up, "you're the children from the Orphan Train." "Danny!" Peg pulled his arm so hard that he lost his grip on the dinner pail and it clattered to the floor. "I have to find the privy," she shouted, "right now." Some of the children broke into laughter and Danny's face grew hot, but Miss Clark immediately pointed to one of the older girls and said, "Elsie, will you please take Peg to the privy? Peg, when you return, you can sit in the front row desk with Molly. Danny, please put your dinner pail and your sister's dinner pail and your coat back in the cloakroom. When you share a desk with Wilmer Jobs. Wilmer, raise your hand so Danny will see who you are." A boy raised his hand slowly and squinted at Danny. Wilmer had a thick shock of straight, tan-colored hair and a long, thin nose and dark eyes set close together. Danny estimated Wilmer and he were about the same size, probably about the same age. "I'll have to watch out for that one," Danny decided. He hung up his coat. As he approached the desk, Wilmer suddenly thrust out a leg, but Danny was ready for it. Instead of tripping and sprawling on the aisle as Wilmer obviously had hoped he would, Danny brought down his weight on Wilmer's toes. Wilmer let out a smothered yelp and slid across the seat as far from Danny as he could get. Danny sat down, took a deep breath, and looked up to see Miss Clark standing beside him holding a book. "Do you read?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Danny answered. "Let's see how well, so I'll know where to place you," she answered. "Will you please turn to the story on page 3? While the others are preparing their lessons, you may come to my desk and read to me." She turned to walk to the front of the room. Danny fumbled with wooden fingers against pages that seemed to stick together, forgetting for a moment about Wilmer, who took advantage of the situation by giving Danny such a shove he toppled into the aisle. Miss Clark turned at the sound of the thump and looked at Danny with surprise, and then she looked at Wilmer. "How'd that happen, Wilmer?" she asked. As Danny scrambled up, he glared at Wilmer, who was gazing at Miss Clark with wide, innocent eyes. "I don't know," Wilmer said. "Maybe he's just clumsy." "Danny," Miss Clark turned to him. "Guess that's right," Danny said. He marched Wilmer from the corner of his mouth. "I'll talk to you later." "You and who else?" Wilmer whispered. "Are you ready to read, Danny?" Miss Clark asked. "I'm waiting." Aware of the impatience that had crept in her voice, Danny hurried to her desk and began to read out loud. As he finished the story, Miss Clark said, "Very good, Danny, thank you. You'll be in the group reading with the 5th reader. Boys and girls in this group will turn to page 25, and I'll ask Elsie to read the first paragraph." During the rest of the morning, Danny tried to concentrate on his lessons, but he had to keep part of his attention on Wilmer, ready for whatever his desk mate would try next. To his surprise, however, aside from the occasional jab of the sharp left elbow, Wilmer ignored him. Danny was surprised when Miss Clark pulled a round watch from her skirt pocket, and announced that it was time for the noon meal. "You may eat outdoors today," she said. The students crowded in the cloakroom to get their dinner pails. Wilmer had been first, shooting out of his seat as though starting a race, and Danny wanted to make sure Peg was all right and was happy to see her hand in hand. And he was happy to see her hand in hand with a small little girl her size. Danny was among the last to reach the cloakroom. He reached up for 2 dinner pails, his and Peg's, but only found Peg's. On the floor in the corner against the wall lay his dinner pail, the lid off and the contents spilled out. The package of sliced bread and cold meat was torn. Heel marks from heavy boots stomped on the food. Danny knew Wilmer had to be responsible, and he was furious. He opened Peg's dinner pail. In addition to the wrapped package of bread and meat, she had an apple and a square of some kind of cake with brown sugared crust on it. Fine, now he knew what to look for. He put the lid back on Peg's dinner pail just as she came into the cloakroom with her new friend. He handed it to her, picked up his own along with the mess on the floor, and went outside. Wilmer was sitting on a log bench with two other boys. When Danny appeared, they stiffened, alert, ready for trouble. Well, well, there's the boy from the orphan train, come here from New York, one of them said. My pa said them Easterners are all abolitionists, the other boy said. We don't need them kind in Missouri. Wilmer kept his eyes on Danny and didn't speak. Danny strolled before him and smiled. Mind if I join you, lads? Before they could answer, he squeezed in next to Wilmer. Hey, Wilmer spoke. Who invited you? In one speedy motion, Danny reached over, grabbed Wilmer's dinner pail, and opened it. Inside, on top of the food Wilmer had brought, lay Danny's sugar cake and apple. These are mine, so I'll put them back where they belong, Danny said. He picked up the cake and apple and popped them in his own dinner pail. You can't, Wilmer began, but Danny interrupted. Where'd the mess come from? He asked in mock surprise. Couldn't be mine. Looks like the kind of slop you'd eat. He picked up the wad of torn and dirty bread and meat and slammed it into Wilmer's pail. He glared at Wilmer and said, if you ever try anything like that again, I'll feed it to you bite by bite. I'd like to see you try it, Wilmer snarled. Oh, would you now? Danny said, and he put down his dinner pail, and the other boys quickly scurried out of the way. Wilmer was faster than Danny had anticipated. He kicked Danny's feet out from under him and gave him a shove and leapt up as Danny fell backward over the log. Bite by bite, was it? Wilmer taunted. Danny was tangled up with some dirty fighters in New York City, and now that he knew what to expect, Wilmer's tricks would be nothing new. Danny stood, took off his coat, jumped on a log, and faced Wilmer. They were evenly matched, Danny decided. Wilmer moved lightly and quickly. However, Danny could see that kicking was one of his favorite moves. Wilmer had taken off his coat, too, throwing it to the side, and he stood up with his right shoulder hunched, his arms up, his hands balled into fists. Good, Danny thought. The way he's holding his shoulder, I can tell he's not as good as the fists as he is with his feet. What's the matter, orphan boy? Wilmer taunted. You afraid? I bet he thinks he'll get in trouble with the teacher, one of the boys said and laughed. Danny hadn't given Miss Clark a thought. If he got into trouble, well, in this case, he didn't have a choice. Maybe we should just shake hands and make up. Wilmer suddenly said. He took a step toward Danny and held out his right hand, but Danny spied the glint in Wilmer's eye and was ready. He took a step toward Wilmer as though he believed Wilmer was sincere, but when Wilmer's right foot shot out, Danny jumped aside. With his right fist clipped Wilmer so hard on the jaw, Wilmer sat down with a thud on the packed ground. Some of the other children had begun to gather around them. You're going to get in trouble if you fight, a girl warned. Want to shake hands now? Danny asked and held out a hand to Wilmer. Yeah, Wilmer said and raised his right hand. I do. Help me up first. As Wilmer gripped his hand, Danny knew he hadn't made a mistake. Wilmer was strong enough to jerk Danny off his feet, and the two of them landed in a heap in the dust. Pummeling as hard as he could and smarting us from the blows he took, Danny rolled over and over on the ground with Wilmer. He heard Peg's voice cry out, "Leave my brother alone!" and someone else shouting for Miss Clark. All at once, Danny felt himself grabbed by a shirt collar and waistband of his trousers and hauled roughly to his feet. He was face to face with Tom, one of the older boys. Another boy, Charlie, had pulled Wilmer up to one side. It's over now. Forget it, Charlie says. The crowd had gathered. Tom ordered Danny and Wilmer, get yourselves dusted off before Miss Clark gets out of that privy. Hurry up. Who started this, Wilmer said. You up to your old tricks, Wilmer? He's an Easterner and an abolitionist, Wilmer said. Charlie's eyes narrowed. What's wrong with that? Wilmer looked startled and wary. Well, it wasn't exactly why we were fighting. Don't matter. The fight's over, he said. But Charlie's face was stern and he remained staring at Wilmer. Slavery's wrong, he said. Fighting for it makes everything worse. Wilmer stuck out his chin and said, Who says so? Just you and your family. My pa says if it comes to war, you'll all be traitors to Missouri. Your pa, Charlie began, but Tom interrupted. Don't get into that now, he hissed. Here she comes. Danny saw Miss Clark hurrying toward him. He tried to smooth down his hair and tuck his shirt back into his trousers and look innocent at the same time. He knew he hadn't succeeded when she stopped in front and asked, Were you boys fighting? Wilmer shot a look at Danny and rubbed the toe of one boot in the dust. Danny took a deep breath and said, You might say we are getting acquainted. Miss Clark's eyes eyebrows rose by rolling around in the dust. It could be that was the best way we could find to figure out what each other is like. You could see that Miss Clark was struggling to keep a straight face. We don't allow fighting here at school, Danny. Yes, ma'am, he said. You understand that, Wilmer? Yeah, Wilmer answered. He glanced at Danny with a puzzled expression. Very well. Now you both understand. You'd better finish your meal. Hurry up. It's almost time to start lessons again. As Miss Clark walked toward the schoolhouse, Wilmer said to Danny, Thought you were going to tell her about your dinner pail. Well, I didn't, Danny said. Besides, you would have just denied it. Your friends would have backed you up. Wilmer nodded. Maybe, but you don't know that for sure. You saying that you'd really tell Miss Clark you stomped half my food and stole the rest? Over and done with, isn't it? Not when my stomach's so hungry it's growling as loud as two dogs and with one bone. Wilmer shrugged. My mom packed me too much food as usual. If you want, I could give you some cornbread and a slice of fatback. Thanks, Danny said. As they walked back from the log and sat down, two boys joined him. This here's Henry. That's Nat, Wilmer said, as the boys opened their dinner pails. They're brothers. He turned to Danny. I'm like you. I ain't got no brothers, just sisters. I got two brothers, Danny said, his mouth filled with cornbread. Where are they? Nat asked. They got placed in other homes. Other homes? Hereabouts? Danny shook his head. Petey's off in Kansas. Mike's living on a farm somewhere in Missouri. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. For a few moments the other boys were silent, and Danny struggled to gulp down the lump that rose in his throat. Wilmer said, I'd trade any or all my sisters for a brother. But if I had a brother, I wouldn't want him to go away. He took a large bite of molasses cake and added to Danny, there's my sister Gussie, who works for Swenson's. Danny took a bite from his apple and sticky juice ran down his chin. He wiped away with the back of his dusty hand. I like Gussie, he said. She's nice. She's bossy, Wilmer said. He licked molasses cake off all his fingers and rubbed his hand down the leg of his trousers. All my sisters are bossy. My pa says some days they'll all grow up and get married and move away, but hard to wait that long. The bell in the school tower clanged loudly, and the boys and girls still in the yard grabbed their things and hurried to get inside the building. As Danny finally slid into the desk next to Wilmer turned to him and gave him a conspiratorial smile. We're gonna work hard on our spelling lesson, Miss Clark said, because we have to get ready for the spelling bee. What's a spelling bee? Danny heard Peg ask. It's a contest to see the best speller in the school, Miss Clark explained. I'm gonna win, Wilmer whispered to Danny. It'll be easy. Danny grinned at him. That's what you think. He'd take Wilmer on in any challenge. We'll have a box supper with your parents, and entertainment will be the spelling bee, Miss Clark said. It's a fall tradition. She rapped on her desk with her knuckles. Pay attention, please. While I'm working with the younger children, you boys and girls from third form, take out your books and slates, and you get to work. Danny, I have a slate for you to borrow till you get one of your own. The slate was passed to Danny. He took it eagerly. He'd never used one before. He checked to see that Wilmer and the others around him were doing with theirs, and worked as they did, copying the spelling list in his reader, writing the words over and over again as he tried to remember the position of the letters. It wasn't hard, it was fun. So Wilmer thought he was going to win, did he? Well, wouldn't he be surprised when Danny came out way ahead of him? When Danny and Peg arrived home in the afternoon, Gussie took one look at Danny and reached for a clean cloth. Can't let Miss Swenson see you looking like that, she said. Show me my kitten first. Peg jumped up and down in excitement. Where's my kitten? Gussie grinned at Peg. In the box in the corner. Mind you, pick him up gentle now. He's beautiful, Peg squealed. And look at the long whiskers. That's why I'll call him Whiskers. As Peg knelt by the box and scooped up the kitten, Gussie wet a rag from the kitchen water pitcher and scrubbed so hard at Danny's face and ears he yelped and tried to squirm away. First day of school and you get in a fight, she said. It looks like you've been rolling around in the dirt. He was, Peg said, and so was the other boy. And who was the other boy? Gussie asked. It doesn't matter, Danny said quickly. Peg's nose crinkled and she tried to remember. I don't know his name, she said, and Danny let out a sigh of relief. Well, the two of you know better than that, Gussie said. She held Danny off and looked at him. You'll do for now. No more fighting. Keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am, Danny muttered. Wilmer was right, Danny thought. Gussie was bossy. Gussie grinned. Don't make me no mind if you call me ma'am, she said. I kind of like it. If you did that all the time, I might even start putting on airs. Now the two of you go in the parlor and be nice and quiet and say hello to Miss Swenson. She's lying on the sofa. Danny asked, is she sick? And held his breath waiting for an answer. She gets tired easy, Gussie said. She has good days and bad days. Just happens to be a bad day. Is it because of us? Do we make her tired? Danny asked, suddenly frightened. No, Gus said. In fact, every time she talks about you and Peg, she colors up and laughs. You're good for her. Maybe even better than the ground beef bones and the wine that the doctor told her to take. The same tonic the doctor had prescribed for Da. Danny shuddered. Our dad got sick, Peg said, and he died. Her voice broke and Danny realized Peg was as fearful as she. Gussie made a shooing motion. No more talk like that. Olga, propped up on the pillows, greeted them with open arms. Peg ran to her, snuggling both Olga and the kitten, and Danny surprised himself by hesitantly kissing Olga on the forehead. Thank you, Danny, Olga murmured and smiled at him with such pleasure that Danny jumped back, knowing from the heat in his face that he was blushing. I wrote to your mother today, Olga said. I knew how anxious she'd be to hear news from you. When we go to town, we can mail the letter. She paused and looked at Danny. I think it'd be nice if you wrote to her, too, and your brothers and sisters, don't you? Danny didn't think so, but he nodded. Where's the list of their addresses? The one Mr. McNair gave you, Olga asked him. Danny shoved his hands in the pocket of his jacket. It's got to be somewhere, he said. Look upstairs, Olga said. You may have tucked it in the chest for safekeeping. Danny couldn't remember putting the list anywhere, but he didn't want to spend the rest of the afternoon looking for it. It'd be too hard to explain to Olga that why he couldn't write the letters yet. I'll look for the list later, he said. Right now, I think I should go outside and find Mr. Swenson. Maybe I can lend him a hand. All right, Olga said with a smile. I know how glad he'll be to see you. Danny took off his school clothes, tried to shake the dust and dirt from him, and slipped into his heavier work clothes. He paused for a moment, wondering if he'd lost that list on purpose, because he didn't want to write the letters. Writing would make it all seem final. He had to keep believing they'd be a family again, or it wouldn't come true. The sun that shone through his bedroom window was already sinking into the twilight. He didn't have time to look for the list. He'd do it after supper. Danny was no sooner out of the kitchen door than Alfred shouted to him over near the woods. Danny raced to join him, arriving out of breath. Would you like to help me collect and tie small branches for kindling? Stack them on the sled? Alfred asked. While we're working, you could tell him about the school. Would you like your teacher? She's nice, Danny panted, slowly catching his breath. She asked me to read and said very good, and she let me a slate till I can get one of my own. Forgot about slates, Alfred said. We'll make out a list of things you and Peggy will need and go to town on Saturday. Now, what about the other boys? Did you make some friends? Danny stood a cluster of stout twigs in his hand. First, could you tell me about Mrs. Swenson? He felt a chill down his backbone as he asked the question. Gussie says Mrs. Swenson tires easily, and you told us she was I forget the word, fragile? Alfred asked softly. Yeah, that's it. Is she very ill? Alfred's face grew solemn and looked right into Danny's eyes. Olga's heart was never strong, he said. She takes the medication the doctors prescribed. I make sure she has the rest she needs. He paused. There's flowers that grow like weeds in the sun, and not even a storm can beat them to the ground. Then there are flowers with pale, delicate petals. They're often the most beautiful, but they must be sheltered and protected. Olga's like one of those special flowers. You understand? Yes, Danny said. He thought at first he did, but as they worked, he realized that Alfred had really not answered his question. The late sun was warm on their backs, but Danny shivered.